share my presentation with you. I'm going to keep my eye on the chat box. So if there are any questions, I'll try to look up for them. And if I won't respond timely, please unmute yourself and just give me a shout about it. And I'll try to respond then. Okay. So share. Okay. So a question, for some maybe it's a rhetorical question, but if you could type in the chat box, why do you think organizations have to change? And we'll see how that goes later on. Let's see what you guys come up with. Resistance, Davis. Is that what move dies? That's exactly true. Stay sustainable and competitive, yes. Stay alive, obligation to law, true. Okay. Continuous improvement, evolution to follow environmental change. That's also true. Great. Those are some really good. To be more flexible. Hi, Dorota. Nothing is permanent. Absolutely true. Okay, this is great. So you'll probably find this more or less on the spot what you guys are saying. So first of all, the life cycle of any system is to change. Another reason to change is innovation. And as well, as mentioned here, crisis. And we're all experiencing this on extremely large scale. Nobody predicted it, but it's what it is, and we have to deal with it. And of course, innovation and crisis can come as well as outcome of the life cycle of a system. But we'll take a quick look at the life cycle and see where the changes in a perfect world, where the changes in the system come from. So why organizations have to change? Well, there are 4 individual stages of life, actually every living system. And that is the embryonic. In business setup, it's pretty much a startup phase. Then you have the growth and scale up, and then the maturity phase, and then later decline. And somebody mentioned here, if you don't change, you die. And that applies absolutely to any living system, which organizations are. And in each of those phases, you have different expectations and different needs. And some pretty often organizations have a hard time shifting from one step to another. So what in the first embryonic phase, in the startup phase, there's actually no making mistakes. It's just experiments and learning. Creativity is more than welcome. We learn all the time. So we're finding the way how we should be doing things. And this is really exciting. And then when we get to the next stage of the organization, the growth stage and scale up, then we pretty much know what needs to be done for the business to go forward. And we had our lessons, we have our takeaways. And this is the phase of scaling, and the more the better, and not necessarily to experiment that much. And then in maturity phase, well, this is the moment where organizations actually know how things are done, their procedures for everything, procedures, processes, and things go by the book. And then if it stays that way, we go into, the organization goes into decline. So you can see that those phases, those stepping points, if the organization doesn't change somewhere in between, doesn't adapt, it causes problems and hard time for change. And we've been working with startups, and it turns out that some of our clients were startups, that for them the growth phase is not so much interesting and exciting. They want to go and create new stuff, not necessarily exactly oriented with this particular organization. So different skills are required at the leadership level. So as somebody said here in this last phase, if something doesn't happen here, the organization will eventually uh, be going slowly into decline. So what happens is in this stage, and we can measure actually the market and organization where it is, and people pretty much know very well where they are at in their organization if you ask them about that. And if nothing happens here at the maturity level, that this is where the innovation has to start, or some kind of a major crisis comes in. And that's where startups aim to create a company and then pretty often be sold to a bigger player. And if you don't take a look at what's going to happen next here, you're going to inevitably experience decline and the death of slow death of the organization. Mm. But if you, and this can be an acquisition, a merger, a new CEO comes in and says that I'm going to redefine everything that is happening here. We're going to work in new ways. So this is a major change initiative there. So if this happens, and this is what we call the breakthrough curve, that the organization has to redefine itself and actually start over, and more or less everybody goes to zero, but in a different scale. Maybe earlier this was a small company with a few people, and when you take the breakthrough curve after maturity, it can be a few hundred or a few thousand people already. So let's take a look how usually the plan changed happens. So we're at point A, and we wanted to get to point B, and we plan steps 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So this is all done usually at the senior level, senior management level, and they hire one of the big four consulting companies to help them figure out this change. So they work and come up with the objectives, the budgets, the how we're going to measure this change, what will the new org chart work after a merger, for example, when two companies come together, what's going to happen with the departments that overlap, um, and how we're going to report the process. And we call this the hard stuff, and this is the everything you can put on paper and measure, count, and plan. And this is really necessary so you know what is the direction. But then what happens to people during a drastic change uh, is they get to ride this emotional roller coaster. I mean, think of you're working in a company and you learn that you've been bought by a competitor, or there's a new owner coming in because you've been bought and he's putting a new CEO or new managing board on top, and nobody knows what's going to be really happening. So people go through what we call this emotional roller coaster when they learn that some major change is going to happen. Mm. A long time they go through this process, and everybody goes through it differently, but you'll have the whole variety of emotions, and people will experience this variety of emotions like shock and denial, anger, how could they do this, and resistance, then try to negotiate. Okay, so maybe if I'll do this, they'll keep my position, or maybe I can win something on this change. And it takes time to finally, although you might have been against it or resistant, to fully accept the process and get on board with it. And what pretty often we'll see in another slide in a second is that people, the decision makers at the top, they go through this process also, and it takes time. But when they get fully on board and accept that this change is inevitable, they figure out the plan and they announce it to the company, And pretty often they expect that the company and everybody in the organization is actually just one day from another jump on board and be excited, when it took for them some quiet time to go over the whole process. So this model comes from from my dear friend, mentor John Scher, one of the giants and heritages of the OD, organization development field, the waterline model. And this model shows two parallel worlds at the same time. One is above the waterline, what we call the hard stuff, what can be planned, what can be measured, uh, prepared for the change itself. Mm. Then there's what happens uh, below the waterline, and that's the human world. That's where you give, because with every change planned, or any plan actually you come up with, it's good as long as you don't give it to people to go through this plan. And Mike Tyson, the boxer, he was once asked, do you prepare for a fight when you know who you're going to fight with? What's his style? What are his strong elements, and what are his weaknesses? And Mike Tyson respond, yeah, of course I plan, I study, I learn, but the whole plan, I forget about it by the first time I get hit in the head. When it comes into action, you forget about the plan. So another way of looking at it is that planning is priceless, but the plan itself, once it put into life, into action, is pretty much worthless, because people, you cannot really be sure 100% what people will be doing, and they are going through a lot of stuff that is not really named or surfaced, and we call that the below the waterline stuff. And our dear colleague Lynn Skotnitsky from Canada said that what usually is perceived as the soft stuff or the soft skills is actually the harder stuff, because it's much harder to deal with. Okay, so when a major change initiative is unrolling, this was what you can expect to see. That on the outside, people, they try to look good, they try to look committed, they try to look on board because they're afraid or not sure. So they want to be feel secure and stay in spot with this initiative. But what they're actually going through is the whole grieving process of the old and letting go of the old. So it's the shock and denial, it's fear, resistance, eventually grudging acceptance, and then hopefully uh, full commitment. But this process is very often ignored by the managing board or the senior leadership team, that they had to take their time to commit and to go through this process themselves, and they expect from the whole company that once they announce it, that everybody will go just like that and be excited and fully committed. And it, I'm afraid, doesn't work work that way. So another one more look at the waterline model is what we say, that above the waterline is the Newtonian world. It's predictable, accountable, and it actually is illusion of control, because it never unfolds the way it was planned. And I'm sure you have tons of your own experiences, your own private, even budgeting, planning. How often does it always go exactly how you planned? If you have more people involved, and it gets even more complicated, and the more steps you have on the way, then it gets even more complicated. So that's why we say that this is the quantum world below the waterline, where everything is just probable, and you just have possibility of influence and encouragement, but you can't really enforce people to change. You can invite them, make it easier for them, but you cannot really force them to change. So what happens with people when they're announced about a change initiative? You can get a whole variety of involvement, hopefully you get as many as possible change champions that are excited about the new possibility, and and they're high on emotions about this initiative. Then you have the willing helpers, and those are the ones that yeah, okay, I'm not sure, but I'm willing to help on this. I'm willing to give it a shot. And very often these are the ones that have a relationship and below the waterline connection with the champions, and they're willing to support them. Then the next group is what we call the fence sitters, and this will probably the vast majority of the participants of the initiative. And they're not for the change, they're not against it, they're just going to sit on the fence and not go either way, and just to check if how things are unrolling, and we'll see, maybe I'll commit later, or if this is a failure, I won't have to sacrifice or be sad about it, that didn't work out because I wasn't so much involved from the first place. Then we have the cynics, that they will say, yeah, sure, I've been there, tried it, doesn't work. Or yeah, that's what they all say. So they're against it, but they're not really saying why. But you can feel they're resistant, and they want to say stay on the safe side, and keep the things unchanged. And then we have the fifth group, which is actually, we call them the enemy, but you can't really call people in the organization setup the enemy, but they're really against, and they're open and honest about it, that they don't believe it, they don't trust it, they don't like it, they don't want to do it, they want to keep things the old way, and very, very open and strongly positioned, and they don't hide it. So so here's a question to all of you: why people resist change in an organization? If you could type in the chat box, why, from your perspective, why people resist change. Feels bad, sure, yeah, thank you. Because it's risky, yes. They don't understand the need, absolutely, Tina, yes. Fear, yes. Inertia and cognitive dissonance, right. Afraid of losing control, thank you, Angela, yes. Too difficult to change, it's inevitable, yeah. And innovative, yes. What's in it for me? Coming under kind of different sleeping mind, yeah. I didn't realize things are coming. That part, being cannot co-create, absolutely. Yeah, yes. I have not been involved, absolutely. Carrie, yes. Okay. Energy hard to overcome, uncertainty, risk, discomfort, absolutely, yes. Okay, so let me go forward with this, and what my friend and mentor Rick Maurer put up into 3 levels is 3 levels of resistance, and why people don't do what we expect in a change process. So he identified 3 levels, and the first level, it was mentioned by somebody here, that they don't understand it, they don't get it, and it's the lack of information, or they don't understand the information. They're confused of what it all means. They can't make sense out of it, and it's pure above the waterline. It's the data. They don't either understand it, they don't have access to it, so that's why they don't understand why it's needed. And second level is they don't like it, and this starts to be the below the waterline human part of resistance. They have fear. They don't know what's coming. Whenever you'll hear, okay, that we're going to restructure the organization, excuse me, one of the first things that comes to mind is, will my positions still be there? Will my desk still be there? Well, maybe now not the desk, but will Well, I have a job later on. Does that include me? What I have to do to sure and be sure that I have a workplace later on after this change. So they're afraid, they don't like it. Mm, they don't like the perspective. They might, somebody said they're not included in the process, in planning process or coming up with ideas, and they're just being announced. And uh, yeah, so that's the number two level. And the third level is that I don't like you. What we mean by this is that there's lack of trust mm, uh, to the leader of the change, or the CEO or the managing board. Uh, they don't have they're not perceived as leaders to lead through this type of process, and it's very difficult to get people, if they have lack of trust, on board in such a process. And probably mm, what's most important, and a lot of people make a mistake here, is that they try to overcome uh, the level 2 and level 3 resistance levels with level 1 uh, techniques. So they give more information and they hope they'll understand it. Well, the problem is that if you have a problem above the waterline, it cannot be solved. I mean, if you have a problem below the waterline with emotions and how people engage, it's really almost impossible to handle it with above the waterline techniques. If you give more data, it won't help. You have to gain trust and get the people interested and feel safe to get on board in such a process. Mm. So, and that can be, of course, a challenge, because sometimes a restructure actually does mean downsizing, especially in a merger uh, initiative. So, any others you would add here uh, to these levels of resistance? I can presume there's lots of experienced people here, so maybe there's something you would like to add. Okay, great question, Karen. Okay, if if knowing more data, of course, it might help, but mm, but if you don't trust the person, and you're afraid it'll be difficult to get on board, even though you have more data, because those are the emotions and feelings, and data doesn't necessarily. I might understand it, but I still don't like it, and I can understand that it's needed, but I'm not on board, and I'm going to sabotage it. Not always consciously, but I won't be supporting it. Uh, are the levels interdependent? Uh, yeah, in a way, of course. It's just a model, so it doesn't fit every case, but in some way, yes, the levels are interdependent. For instance, going the other way around, like we in one of the previous slides, uh, that if you have a champion and somebody who's willing to help, I might not understand all the data, but I'm definitely, because I like you, I trust you, I'm willing to help, although I don't understand everything that is happening here. Do not agree with the change of the new direction of the company. Yes. Mm. Yes, thank you, Gifranco. Sorry if I got your name wrong. So we can consider level 1 to be above the waterline and level 2 and 3 below. Absolutely. And okay, so I didn't mention one very important thing, that if in the waterline model, it's not that the above the waterline is less important than the below the waterline. They're both as important, and a good leader or a good leading team is willing to go above the waterline and below the waterline, because you have to pay attention to both, because these worlds happen simultaneously. There's data and there's the process of people. So you have to be willing to go there and there, there and there. So I don't want to make the impression that one of them is more important than the other. Rushed and half-baked change initiative. True. Hmm. Okay. Thank you for that input. So going next. Okay, so this comes from the OD field. Oops, sorry. Mm. So OD is application of action research and systems thinking, systems theory into human systems to increase the internal and external effectiveness of organization and its members. So especially in facilitating change, using participative process that involves those affected. So this will be answer to one of the statements earlier mentioned that people are not included in the change process. So we're slowly getting into the concept of getting the whole organization included, because then it really makes much more sense. And this approach, this definition of OD comes from Alban and Scher from the book Practicing OD and the chapter on the shoulders of giants. So how the whole field of organization development came to life and is as it is right now. And the pioneer of this and the roots of applied behavior science come from Kurt Lewin from early 20th century. Kurt Lewin was Polish, which I don't want to take any credit to being also Polish for that, because all of his work actually about systems thinking, applied behavior science, planned change, action research, and field force analysis comes from his work when he was already in the States. He migrated to Germany, and then when he was Jew, he migrated to States because his daughter was not allowed to go to university. So luckily for all of us, he migrated to the States. And he has come up with this formula that behavior is a function of the person itself and the environment surround. I've just written a book on OD and change. Thank you. Well, look, thank you for the link. Definitely, we'll take a look at it there. So this formula says that if you want to have any change, you have to make sure that the environment changes, not only the person. Because if you just want the person itself, especially to have the change sustainable in a big setup like an organization, you have to be working in many places, not in one place, and hope they'll become contagious and grow into the whole system. So this approach I'm going to present to you in a couple of minutes deals with the how to actually make little drops come in the whole organization and start the change there. Okay. So, but before I go there, I'd like to give you a sample of Beehive as an incredible system. Oops. A sample of a living system, and change agents in the system. In a typical hive, you'll have several thousands of bees, and whenever a bee finds a place where there's lots of flowers to come up with the powder. I'm sorry, I forgot the English name for that. What they collect, and pollen. Thank you. Great teamwork. Fantastic, Karen. Thank you. So when they collect pollen, when a bee realizes that this is just a whole bunch, and we can live here for a long time collecting the pollen on this field, this bee flies to the beehive and starts a special type of dance and goes in circles You can look up on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find cool videos on that. But it goes in circles, and um, with with its mm, mm, oops, forgot the word, sting. Yeah, with its sting, with the vibration of the sting, and how and the direction how it dances, it shows the other bees where's the field with bunch of flowers and pollen to collect. And this starts to grow from the single bee to wider circles and wider. And you can see synchronicity when those bees are dancing. And they uh, get the information and give it to the next row, the next circle that is wider and wider and wider. The thing that happens here is that all those bees, okay, so now we have to go in this direction because there's how it's coded, that's a different story. But in the way that the single bee is dancing is all the information where you have the field with the flowers. But what happens then? Uh, about 5% of the bees don't go there. They actually go into every other direction. And it's you might think, okay, those are rebels. They don't never do what they're told, but that's actually not true. They checked it, and it's different bees every time because the system knows. I mean, their general knowledge of the bees, they know that if they only spend time exploiting this one field, and they will drain it, uh, and then they will not have time to look for other resources and other fields with plants to collect the pollen. So the extra 5% of the bees, their mission is actually to go and search in different areas on purpose. And it's not there's different type of bees. They just split in certain way, but sometimes this bee gets chosen to go and collect pollen on the field that is known, and sometimes the same bee will go to a different place. So they have this set of group of agents that go and explore new areas. And there's lots of other great metaphors, and the beehive is just a fabulous living system. How systems, yeah, early department, absolutely. Mm, mm. Yeah, so just wanted to bring that to your attention that it's not something that we humans have come up with. It's in nature as well. Okay, so going further mm, into what roles are to be taken. I'm not going to be reading this. You can read this later on, and I'll also share the slides so you can read that. But just going shortly, first of all, the champion. This is the hopefully the CEO of the organization, and he has to be on board and and give his blessing to this process. He might not be active, very much active in this process because he's got a business to run at the same time. But he has to be on board. He has to be also committed, and it has to be spoken to the whole organization. So he has to kick off a major change initiative as a leader uh, and show that he's committed and he's supporting the agents. He's to also um, get on board the sponsors. We'll get to that in a second. Then we have the change agents, and that's the skill facilitators that come in and support the initiative. But they're one of their biggest roles is to work with what I called here the OE team. And OE team is a group of people from the organization that is going to lead the change within the organization. I'm going to spend later a couple of slides to talk about them because the way it is constructed and how it's run is the key element to get the whole organization on board. Then you have recipients, and this is actually everybody in the system, starting with the CEO and the frontline workers finishing along with everybody in between. And then we have sponsors that are all managers at all levels in the organization. They have to understand the process and to know that the OE team uh, will be coming in, supporting and delivering some kind of work, but that means they have to also get some kind of lighter treatment because they will have to take some time of their work to run the change process. It's not that they're now stopping and they're not going to be doing their work. They just should get some support in this to create some time for their development and running the change process. Mm. So this is the setup part of the change process, which you'll see later in the diagram where I show the whole flow of the process. So the OE team, and pretty often the OE team, we call it for our needs. You can call them the change agents or internal facilitators or internal consultants. Usually they come up with their own unique name based on what change really is about in this particular case. So what is an OE team? It's a cross-functional, multi-level group of ordinary people. And they go through a training to become a high-performing team. And they come, okay, I'll get to that in a second. Their task, their main initiative is to lead the change initiative itself, although they're not directly responsible for the change process. They're to facilitate the change. So this is oh, thank you, Angela. OE, organization effectiveness or organization enhancement. So we usually use this term as a starting point, but they come during the training they go through, they come up with a name for themselves. Usually something connected to the organization values and the direction that the change is to take. And the OE team has a representative feel. What this means is that everybody in the organization, when they get introduced to the OE team, they can find somebody that represents me. So it has to be differentiated and on many levels. So we start from every level of the organization, from every silos, if it's a silos organization. It should include a trusted senior manager, uh, usually not the CEO, but somebody from the managing board. And experience shows this should not be the HR person at the top, but somebody who is respected and has a lot of trust and is perceived as a person that below the waterline, it's easy to connect with this person. And the OE team will work intensively with HR team, you'll see in a second as well, and is equipped and trained by the external consultants. That's the work that we usually do for them or with them and support them later on. So where the OE comes from? Well, first, there's somebody from the senior leadership team, hopefully from the managing board, that will be directly connected, and this person will be the champion of this process. Somebody from a lower level of directors, frontline people, from middle managers, actually from everywhere from the organization. And those will be pairs that will go out to run a series of meetings that they get prepared for to run the initiative. So, okay. So the whole process is run by the OE team with support of the external consultants, the agents. So how does the communication, oh, maybe one more thing here, as for the representative feel. In one of the earlier slides, Um, OE team is a form of a project team. That would be true. Yes. Uh, the only the difference here might be that they get really special training up front to run the project. So it's just not pure project management team. Uh, and you'll see why also in a moment. So the um, has a representative feel. Uh, in one of the previous slides, I showed what you can expect, what kind of emotional involvement, how people feel about the change. So there will be the champions that are really excited and can't wait for it, and they're very emotionally engaged and looking forward. And at the same, on the other side, you'll have the enemies that are also very emotionally involved but are totally against. So the one of the important elements is to have a representative of the enemy, so-called uh, organization. OE is organizational effectiveness team or organizational excellence enhancement. But it's just a working name. It's a team of internal consultants in the organization. Mm, yes, Ilham, that's it. It's that's an internal project team paired, supported by external consultants. That will work. Yes. How are the people selected to join the team? Okay, uh, it's it's uh, it's support. It's selected by the HR team uh, or supported by the HR. So there's people that are known to be trusted in the organization that are perceived as leaders, not necessarily formal leaders. They don't have to have a formal position, but they're like influencers. So we want such people in the in this team, and also people that are against the change initiative itself. And they very often ask, "Why the hell do you want us on the team? We're against it." And this is exactly why we want them on the team, because they represent a very valid point of view that is present in the system, in the organization, and it has to be spoken up, and they will definitely take care that all the uncomfortable things that are usually under the table will surface and will be named. They will not let it slip. And this is exactly why we want that, because a lot of things and change initiatives are not spoken openly, and that's why they rotten the process. And that's why uh, I mean, McKinsey, time after year, brings in statistics that not more than 30% of change initiatives actually succeed. And we believe that this is one of the major reasons that things are not talked about, that are really important from the below the waterline. They are not surfaced because we want to involve the people that are crazy excited about it, and ignore the ones that are not and are against it. And then for some reason things don't work. And guess why? Well, because this voice was not spoken up. So the has a representative feel. This is very important. That whatever your attitude toward the change initiative is, whatever department you're in, whatever level you're in, and other criteria might apply in a particular case, that you can see in the 20 or 40 OE team members, the internal consultants, that you can see, oh, I can see somebody that represents my voice. And I know that this or this person, they know what I care for or what is my situation, and they will represent my voice. So this is very very important. Um, a real-time understanding of what is going under the waterline. Um, um, an interesting point of people who against change to on the team. Never thought of that. Thank you. Yeah, how do you get it? So, I'm sorry, I'm reading the question. I'm going to read out loud. How do you get the OE team to get a grasp of an ideal real-time understanding of what is going on under the waterline? Great question. Yes, one of the first things during the planning, getting prepared for the process, is that the OE team, we usually take them off-site for a couple of days, and they get a really intensive training. You could say about the soft skills, but it's much more sophisticated than just being a good listener or being empathetic with another person. So they get trained before they get into the, let's say, battlefield of the change process. Okie dokie. Yep. Would love to pronounce your name correctly, but I'm too afraid to do that. Sorry. Okay, so they come from all over the organization. So along the process, there's plenty of meetings, because the whole organization is split into little chunks of groups, usually teams, but up to 16 people, maybe sometimes 20, and each the whole organization is split into chunks like this, and each OE team has usually several internal clients that they will be working with, and they're responsible for the communication with these groups. And what is important is that they cannot be responsible for groups or teams or departments that they're part of. So for instance, if we have somebody from marketing and finance, they can have as a client IT, operations, logistics, something else, but not their own departments. And this is very important, because when they facilitate any meeting, it's much more difficult to stay neutral if you're talking to with colleagues that represent too much of yourself. So if you're if I would be if I'm an IT person, I would facilitate a meeting for IT, some group. It's difficult for me to stay comfortably in the yes, personal interest conflict, absolutely, to stay neutral facilitator. So what the OE team is, they're responsible for the communication and the dialogue between actually the whole system and the change process itself, that how it's led and what's the data coming out of it. And it's above the waterline. It's the timely, honest information from a trusted source, because people will trust much more their internal colleagues than anybody from the outside coming and announcing anything about the organization. And they do get the experience, and during the workshop they get as a preparation, they learn how to have meaningful conversations, how to get the data, the interesting information from their client groups, from their client departments that they take care of. So they are the representative of the change initiative for the whole organization, to lead the process, to gather and deliver information to everybody. And so it's not, of course, there's also other communication on the meantime. There's a communication subgroup of the OE team that delivers newsletters to inform what things are happening. But the live interactions are the most important ones. Okay. So now let's look for through the whole breakthrough process, how it works. This will be a complicated slide. So please, if you'll have questions, stop me and I'll try to explain. Because this is on this slide, I'll put the whole process, how it unrolls and develops. So phase one, to prepare the organization for the change initiative. Well, first there's planning and This work is done usually with HR and the CEO or the managing board, um, depending on the setup or the context. If it's a merger acquisition or it's a major culture change initiative, usually don't people usually don't like to be involved in a change in a sense. Okay, we have to change this. But if you invite people, especially if a new CEO comes in and says, "I'm going to change the culture of the organization," good luck. Uh, if this is the first statement that such a person will come up with, that would be really challenging. But if you ask people, okay, where do we want to get to, and they come up with a B that they want to get to, then let's think of, okay, what are the steps we have to make on the way to get there. And it usually turns out that it is a major change initiative, but doesn't have to be named like this from the start. So you have to take into consideration the strategic plans of the organization. If you perceive that you'll be bought in some new future and you want to look better, you want to invest somehow the whole organization. What will that mean? What are the company's objectives? And then the preparation for decision makers. And this is the part that all managers, or at least to some level, get involved, and and the stakeholders. So to decide what is going to happen, how is it going to happen, and then we have the OE team that in step two they're being chosen. And there was a question how they get to be chosen. Usually, there's always we always give space also to some volunteers. So there are people that we recommend, and it's always an invitation. You cannot say, okay, you and you and you and you come and be in the OE team. Uh, these people are informed. Usually, as we say, the drums are beating, so the company knows that there's something going on. Nobody knows exactly yet what, where this is going to go. So we invite. I mean, the HR usually invites a group of people, uh, and from our experience, um, I don't recall a case that would say, no, I definitely don't want to be part of it. They might disagree with the change process, but we usually, because of that, we manage to convince them to take part in being in the OE team, that their voice is really valid and important for the process, and they'll guarantee some of the important elements of the process to show up. Uh, so at the end of this preparation phase, the OE team is being trained, and after the training, introduced to the whole organization. And this usually is done by the champion. So hopefully it's the managing somebody from the managing board, uh, or the introduction itself. The beginning could be done by the CEO, him or herself. So everybody knows that the main leader is behind and supporting this initiative. Mm, and the OE team is being introduced, and also at this moment, the managers at all levels have to be also convinced and understand, and that this way of working will be beneficial for everybody. So phase two is diagnosing the situation. So that's where the meeting starts from, of the OE team with the whole system. And this is a system-wide diagnosis laid by the OE teams. And usually using this first phase, we usually involve the affinity process to come up with three top ideas. And the question that we're looking for depends on uh, on the context of the change initiative. So, for example, if we would just say, just for this as an example for this meeting ours here for this session, if we want to say, okay, we want our company organization to be more effective, so this will be the question that the OE team will go to every department and say, okay, uh, and use, for example, an affinity process to come up with ideas of what could be changed, improved, or done less. There are different models to ask this question. And through the affinity process, they'll come up with top three uh, of initiatives. And those initiatives that OE team gathers, they usually, you can divide them on three levels. Level one will be something that is about only this particular department, but has never been named or labeled or brought on the surface. And so somebody mentioned here, how do we get the OE team to be so comfortable with working below the waterline? So this is, I think, kind of the part of the magic that happens here, that these people get really comfortable with that. And they don't take those things when they facilitate the meeting, they don't take anything personally. So, but create the space where a lot of unnamed things come up. Uh, and if it's something that is about this particular team, usually no further work is needed. Just this team starts to, or this department or this group of people starts to solve this because it's finally named. Then we have the second level would be the ones that are between departments, so require some kind of cooperation. But once it was named, it often happens that if below the waterline people have good relationships, they also don't wait any longer to do something about it. They just go to this other department and say, okay, you know what, this came up, and how can we deal with this? But then there are the system-wide changes, like let's say location of the organization of the company is bad. It's not suited. It's not working, or the bonus system is not working, or the strategy is not clear, or you can name a bunch of those. But they are to be addressed by something from, or somebody from the top, and they cannot, this group of people cannot deal with it directly themselves. So this comes out from this point, from this fourth point. And after that, the OE team, maybe also to say that for the first couple of meetings, the OE pairs, they're usually they have come, the external consultants, like we come to be in the shadow and help them facilitate the first couple of meetings like this. And after one, two, I don't think we went ever with more than two with any other team. Maybe sometimes they knew that this will be a very challenging team to talk about things, so they ask us to come in and support. But they usually put it in such a way that they can perceive that this team will be easier to work with, so they start with this team. So by the time they get to a more challenging team to work, they already have some experience and feel pretty comfortable and confident how to do it. But sometimes they ask us to come with them for further as well. Um, and because of, depending on the scale, sometimes this first meeting of gathering data, an OE pair will have from few to more to a dozen meetings just to gather this first data. And they come up with top three, for example, top three system-wide initiatives they think the system, the organization should take a look at and change something. And usually there's some kind of suggestion what could be changed, but usually it's the question of, okay, where should we put our attention to? After that, there's the OE team and staff team, which is the external agents with us. We go also offsite and gather all the data. And that's usually quite a lot of data. That can be several thousand inputs. And most of them address very similar issues. They're just named slightly different. And so the process here is to gather this and group into similarities and label them as a major theme. And then after sorting and sorting those sometimes few thousand of ideas, you get, we pick 10, top 10, what we call the operational log jams, because this is something that was identified by the majority of organization, and maybe in different forms, but then it's presented to, okay, how is your communication team involved, and how do you see the reporting back to the progress to staff? Okay, thank you. So this is actually, thank you. I missed that, and that is a fascinating. Thank you, Karen. Um, uh, the OE team. So first of all, every team in the organization is a client of uh, some pair of OEs. So even the managing board is a client of an OE, of some OE team. So usually we usually put the person, the pair that has somebody from the senior leadership team and some kind of a junior, that they're in a pair, that their clients is the managing board. So managing board also in every managing level is a team. So they all experience the whole process. And how is this being communicated? There's, first of all, within the OE team, there's a group of communication team, and they make sure that the communication goes to the whole organization through newsletters or where we up with the process. And also, at the after the fifth point, when the data is gathered, this is being presented by OE team, by a representative OE team, to the managing board and the managers, depending on how many levels there are. But as many managing levels as possible, the better. So then we organize a meeting and they present, okay, we went through all, I don't know, 50 departments or 50 groups or 100, whatever. We gathered this and this data. We show them some samples and also some quotes, which are sometimes very powerful because, well, they come from a live person, and they have extra power. Sometimes they don't hesitate to use dramatic words, and because they feel comfortable, and at this level, or I mean at this phase 4, they feel comfortable because they're talking actually to their colleagues. I mean sometimes the same level, so they don't they feel very comfortable talking honestly. Jennifer, I see the question. I'll get back to that in a second. So over here, when the data is identified and the top 10 is identified, this data is being presented to the managing board. And now, how are the Jennifer's question? How are the long gems prioritized by whom? Okay, so those top they are prioritized by the OE team. So they do have an impact on what's happening here, but it's usually if you have a statement that has many ways of saying the same thing, you could put you would put weight on this particular statement, and we could see, okay, so there was like 50 statements that the bonusing system is not clear to the workers, or the location of the organization or how it's structured is bothering the colleagues in the office, and there's, let's see, 50 votes or 50 messages on that. So once you get this data, and it can be a huge wall of takes quite some time to prioritize and then put together, like also in a affinity process. It can be also run in affinity process later on, and that's how you get the data. But it might be a question, yes, to decide how it is, how the top 10 are identified. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward. Sometimes it might require some kind of thinking about it. But then when the top 10 is identified, it's usually the first 10. If there's more, then okay, let's deal with the first 10, and then let's deal with the next 10. Because if you try to deal with all of them at once, nothing will happen. none of that will actually come to life. Bryony, sorry if I got your name wrong. It sounds like you prioritize these simply based on number of mentions. Is that uh, that's probably the major one included. It's pretty clear once you get this data, which is very important, which has a lot of mentionings from in the system. Yeah. Okay. So now the next step is the breakthrough thinking work is in cross-functional action teams. So once the top 10 is identified of what needs to be dealt with, um, 10 is pretty much already, but let's say it was 10. Maybe it'll be 3 to start off will be enough. Then out of the OE team, we choose volunteers who want to lead the breakthrough thinking work on a particular topic. And they will be the champions of these new initiatives, working on those topics. And they usually volunteer to what I want to go into this, I want to go into this. And then they invite people that have the experience or have given the input also in a way to this particular topic, and an action team is formed then to start meetings on how to address this particular topic, because over here at stage 5 we only know the log gems. We don't really know yet about the recommendations or ideas how to solve this issue. This is the work of this next phase. Okay, and now the phase 3, the generating the breakthroughs. So this is at this phase, the action teams, breakthrough action teams, come up with recommendations and present that to the managing board, because usually what they're working is about the whole system. It's not the small things between two departments, because usually that starts to be solved over here. It doesn't very often get over here. Okay, so presentation and over here the decisions are made by the managing board what actually will be happening and what actually will be done about the top 10s. And the last phase is implementing and tracking the breakthrough projects. And then over here you would have a real project management teams called in or formed to run those changes itself, which have been identified from the system. And so what's missing here is that this between here and here, there's a set of meetings as well to be announced, and sometimes it's a couple of rotations between the OE team and their internal clients. Because sometimes something new shows up in this moment that was not planned. Talk about planning. But those the OE team is recognized by the whole system, and they become very influential people within the organization. And it's one of the really exciting things about this approach, that the know-how about running or rolling out a change initiative for the whole system stays in the system. After phase 8 or 9, we as external consultants are actually not anymore needed. I know it's not the best thing for the business side from our perspective, but they usually call us in for some extra additional things, because running those cross-functional action teams can can get pretty heated up because you can have two departments or so that are really struggling to cooperate, and the OE team needs some extra support to run tough conversations. Um, so they create the space for this exchange about tough ideas and tough expectations sometimes. Sorry. So pretty often there's a cycle of extra meetings here, and as well extra training for the OE team. Over here, they get training to run the first set of meetings to gather the information, and later on, depending on what's happening, they might need extra training from external consultants, that being us, to how to deal with tough conversations or productive interaction meetings and etc. Okay, so I see I'm looking at the clock and it's 11:17. I could probably go into more details, but taking into consideration our time constraints, we've got 13 minutes left. So maybe I'll open up now for a conversation and some extra questions. So if so, please do. And yeah. It's such a broad and deep systemic. Oh, Andrew, thank you. That's true. That is to sell this kind of approach is an extreme challenge. The process itself usually takes, if we're really tight on time, it's 6 to 9 months. Usually takes a little longer. And getting on board, you have to have trust on the top level to get into this work. But then it's really extremely fulfilling when you see that the whole system is actually step by step doing something to change. So it's really rewarding, not only financially. BT, are these pre-change management are these pre-change management delivery steps? Sorry, I'm not sure, BT, about the question. So if you can elaborate more, I'll be happy to respond. But I'll answer to Jennifer. Do you have any advice for working with smaller organizations? Okay, so I think the smallest that we tried in a similar way would be for about 50 people. And then it's the OE team is not like 20 or 40 people. It'll be 4-6 people. And but the process itself, sometimes it will be, I mean, the small organization will be easier to get everybody in the room or everybody on Zoom to talk freely. There are now great tools to get input in the meantime while running a presentation. So there's great mechanics for that. But this will more or less apply also to smaller systems. It doesn't have to be several thousand people. Karen, are the views of external stakeholders looking at social services ever sought along the way, or does this create uncertainty into relationships? Great question. Well, this is, yeah, okay. So I personally haven't been involved in like a social service, but John Scher, he has run projects like that, and I know about that. And yes, it does create uncertainty, but but that brings me. I'm sorry, I'm going to skip to a different point, which is very important, I think, here in this process, is that at some point the OET team is being perceived as responsible for the change itself. And this is something that they start to become concerned with after the first set of meetings where they run. And this is very important to say that they run the process, but they're not responsible for guaranteeing any outcome. They're not responsible for the outcome itself. They're responsible for the process to go. But what are the outcomes, decisions, and later breakthrough projects? They're neutral to that, of course, as much as they can be neutral, because they have their personal interests in some of those as well, being part of the system. But going back to your question, Eversant, along the. I'm sure they create uncertainty, but what but I think that going through these processes, what we emphasize a lot is to be naming the uncomfortable things, and people involved, they start to feel pretty, well, difficult to say comfortable, but they learn how to handle difficult and uncomfortable experiences, and they learn how to bring on the table and put on the table all the emotional world that sometimes it's not being named, the fear, the regret, the anger, um, um, the irritation sometimes that something is taking so long, and they feel comfortable with working on that, with that. Is with the organization who are committed to do the outside. Yes, the OE team is within the organization, and that's why it's important to have their direct superiors on board, that they know that the OE team has also now an extra chunk of obligations for the company's benefit. So it's done besides their regular obligation. And the outcome of this process also is that the whole organization, the OE team is really well trained set of facilitators, and this is the skill that stays in the organization. This might be sometimes even uh, the biggest success or the benefit of the organization, because I must say that we had experiences when we actually got to a certain level of the process, and thus, guess what, some other major change is happening, because, for example, a new CEO comes in and says, okay, I love that, but I'm going to actually kill it. Done. We try to work with such a CEO to well, at least let it go. He doesn't have to support it later on, but at least let's take something from some benefit from the investment, and that usually goes okay. But we don't always get support later on. So it did happen that we've been shut down in the mid process, but the momentum and the engagement of the whole system stayed, and we know that even though we didn't get to these phases over here in case of one big company, they continued with the change independently of what the new CEO was leading the organization into which direction. So it was really really fulfilling for us that we got people so involved. Okay, so I'm going to close the presentation. Stop sharing. And yes, if anybody would like to come with a live question, and I'd love to hear some voices as well. So if you're willing to open up and showing, that would be great.
Hi, it's Paul here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Paul.
Yeah. So sorry, I had to step out for a while. Something came up, but I was interested in one of the questions that was asked whilst always. Any advice for working with smaller companies or organisations? Could you just repeat?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. So, if I could give a word of recommendation, is to first of all get the managing board or whoever is the decision maker about the waterline model, that there are two worlds happening at the same time every single moment. I mean, now on one side, you're hearing and making sense of what I'm saying. And on the other side, it makes you feel somehow about it. And this is, I know this is obvious, but it's not that obvious in challenging moments. And when we plan, I'm sorry, when we plan a change initiative, this perspective is very important to be included. And the three levels of resistance that people don't understand it, they don't like it, or they don't like the leader of the change. So I think those are the most important things to keep in mind in context of a smaller organization. Thank you, Paul.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Karen, please.
I'm sorry to keep harping back on the communications, but I've been working in organisations where they do change, and
yes,
silos have developed, and each unit will come to us and say, we want you to do this in our newsletter, or we want you to be involved in this meeting but not that meeting, and then you're required to follow the company line, and
Yep.
but you have different interests and vested interests coming, wanting you to put a certain presentation across. So my question is, what do you see the most important means of communicating company-wide to people?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Karen. So what what we usually do is we have within the OE team, we have a pair or a trio, sorry, depending how big is the team, what we call the communication team. And they are responsible to communicate the information to the whole system independently of the communication done by internal newsletters or communication channels. And they're given a green light from the CEO to deliver the information independently, because they communicate only about this change initiative, where we are at, that the OE team has already spoken to everybody in the team in the organization and is processing the data. And then this is the 10 outcomes from the meetings, etc. So it's done independently of the organization communication channel.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, I think we have some.
Guys,
Somebody. Okay. Kabatai. I'm not sure if I got the name right, but when I muted, it worked. Okay. It's 11:29, and if there are no more questions, I'm more than happy to stick around if somebody would like to continue with a question. But I would like to thank you all for taking the time and being here with me. I hope you found that enjoyable, and you found something for your work and your experience to be to contribute. I would be happy to know that. Yes, sure, please. Yes.
Yes, so I first of all thank you for giving me insight into this waterline model. I it's the first time to actually learn about it. And
Great, happy.
my question is, how does one build capability of change management in an organization enterprise-wide? And my other question is, you've been talking about implementing change management at a project level, and essentially there would be that governing structure at a project level. And I'm just wondering, at an organizational level where there will be multiple projects running at the same time, how do we ensure that there is a governance of the change management efforts for different projects, overseeing and having interest on the different projects that are undergoing at the same time?
Right. Okay. So that's yeah. Thank you. So this did happen to us a couple of times. That outcome of the diagnosis phase brought up some issues that there already was a team on working on a similar topic, or more or less this topic, and so then it's a question of dialogue between what if the team that is already working on the topic, would they like some input, because if not, then it won't be of any support. But it's a question of communication and bringing on board, so people that are already in some kind of a project don't feel also here threatened that, okay, a new project will be started, actually overlaps with us, and how do we deal with that? It has to be done in some kind of collaboration and communication and agreement on both sides. And
Okay.
does that answer your question?
Yeah, but not to create dialogue, just a follow-up.
Yes.
I would like to know what advice you would give with regards to having leaders actually sponsor change, because I've realized, especially in my organization, we are struggling on that element where leaders are sort of shying away, or they're not confident to actually do the sponsorship responsibilities.
Okay, so that's an extremely challenging situation you're facing, because the leaders should be. The whole topic of leadership is a passion of mine. On a totally different side, I mean, why do people want to become leaders? What does it mean to be leader, and etc. Because very often people are put in a position, management position, and that's not the same. Management position is not a leadership position, and management is duty, responsibility, and leadership is leadership and followership and service. So people want to, you cannot become a leader just because you want to be a leader. You have to be a leader because you become a leader because people want, you're going in a certain direction or in a certain way that people admire and want to follow you, and they choose to follow you. So that's leadership. And so what I understand is that managers in your organization are afraid to take the initiative or take ownership and be dedicated sponsors of a change initiative. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what it is.
Yeah. So, so it's a question of if they buy in the change and convincing them that if they don't take the ownership, the probability of the change happening and bringing anything good into the organization is really slim. If they don't, and how to be persuasive? Well, that's I don't know the context, of course, of your situation and how to deal in this particular case. But one of the ways of bringing them on board is how is the present situation affecting them right now, and what is possible if change would to succeed, and what is the price and whatever resources they're paying of change not happening. And because maybe the outcome will be that the change is not needed. But if you go with these questions and they really dig into that, it'll be difficult to say, oh, no worry, everything is okay. I doubt that, because there's always a price that they're paying in sense of any resources, time, money, whatever it is, not implementing the change. But then there's also you might want to dig into if you write me an email, I'll send you. I'm reachable on the Change Management Network. If you write me an email, I'll send you some information about Kurt Levine's field force analysis, because if you'll see, there's some forces pushing for change, and then at the same time there's some what people usually try to do is to put more effort on those forces that drive the change. But then on the same moment, there are forces that are stopping the change. And sometimes it's much easier not to put more effort to drive the change, but to eliminate something from the change, from the forces that is stopping the change. So maybe this will be a way of looking at the costs and benefits of change happening or not happening with your management.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Okay. So if there's any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Okay,
Gustav, you look like you're warming up. Please.
It's evening here in Tokyo.
I love Tokyo. Just to give you a single word, I'm a 5th degree black belt in Aikido. That's where my leadership for passion comes from. And I've been to Tokyo several times. Cool. Yeah, so.
Yeah. I bet
so please.
Piotr here in front of you. How about a CEO that is outgoing from the company? My company is probably going to be bought up. Yep. And I am unlikely to stay in the new organization. So I would love to help, but I don't think I can be like the champion of change, yeah?
Right.
Because I'm not going to stay. But I definitely don't want to become the enemy you wrote about in the left part of the graph. So if a person who is not going to stay, but still, I'd love to, help the new organization. Any advice?
Yeah, that's really cool what you're saying, Gustav. One of our clients, just to share it with you, we had a merger of actually 3 big IT companies, and the new company that acquired 2 other companies, they hired McKinsey to say, okay, how should we look after this change? Because there's like 3 CEOs, 3 marketing directors, 3 everything. And McKinsey came up with a new org chart and recommendations. And they said, within the next year, out of the 2,000 people, you have to fire 800. Let go. So you can imagine how excited people were about that. And at the same time, so this is when we got brought in as a company to lead through this process, which was extremely challenging. And yes, 800 people were let off. Nobody fired a case. Nobody sued anybody. And for the managing positions, the managers knew, for example, as the example of the marketing director, say, there were 3 marketing directors that knew that there will come a day within the next few days that only one of them will continue on this position, or maybe none of them, because they'll come up with somebody totally else. And we did manage being totally honest and transparent about the process. And the way it was led, all three of them worked till the last day, dedicated to support the change and benefit of the company. But I'm sure that one of the key elements was to talk about the unpleasant and uncomfortable things, as, for example, the fear of being let go, and making space for these kind of conversations as well. So going back to your question, Gustav, how do you know you're probably not going to stay there, and how do you support? It's first of all, words of admiration to you that you still want to contribute to the company, although you know you're not going to probably be benefiting from it. But engaging others and supporting them in optimism and hope that, okay, this will actually turn out good for everybody, and sharing this kind of attitude, and sharing your knowledge and experience, and being open to share what you have, and be included in any change, decisions, and supporting and saying, I know I probably won't be part of this, but I still want to be supportive here, is probably the best thing you can do.
I will, sir.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
I was very thankful. Great to hear all this today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Okay. Anybody else? Jaromir, it looks like you want to
hello,
share something.
Hello, Przemek. Oh, sorry, it's Sam from
It's
the
okay.
right, my right. Sorry for that. Yes, it was a very interesting event, led by you, of course. And
Thank you.
my question is, what is important? What should we pay attention to, especially during the change process, to ensure success?
Okay, so that's a very broad question, of course.
Yes, right.
But I think creating the space and modeling of sharing of some stuff that is uncomfortable, and being transparent and open. You as a facilitator, as a change, if you the facilitator itself is the is the change source in a way. So if you step in and say, okay, I feel uncomfortable, or I'm not, I don't feel convinced. If you create this kind of vocabulary, you create a norm also that other will feel comfortable with using this kind of statements in the change process. And that will hopefully encourage and empower them to speak things that are usually hidden under the table. And they are personally, I believe that they're the source of failures. The stuff that we don't feel comfortable talk about. So that would be my hint.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, Jaromir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I love Tri-City, by the way.
Yes, it's nice, very nice place.
Anya Broniek, that is here on the call, she's from Tri-City.
Okay. Oh, that's great. So she knows Tri-City very well. It's a nice place. I invite everyone who watch this video. Yes, that's great. So I think one of my thought after your online event webinar is that we have to involve all people in organization, I think, to the change process to
yes, definitely
make it success. Of course.
That brings, maybe I didn't say it explicitly, but somebody in the chat wrote it. That
yes,
that brings
I saw it. Yes.
Ownership. That if people feel involved, if people feel that their voice counts, it might not be a major voice, but at least somebody listened to them and they had some kind of impact. and later they can see in the top 10 or top 3 or whatever, they can see something that they also voted for, or they said, yeah, this has to change. They'll feel heard and involved, and they'll feel ownership of this change initiative. And the possibility of change happening and succeeding rises much higher then.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for it. And thank you for
Thank you, Jaromir.
Thank you very much.